Making a fist right now, holding it the way he was, yeah, I can see that working. But I do not do the fist. My hand is open, so holding it here, more like he used to, thumb over the last part of my finger there where the fingernail is, that works for me. So I would imagine it would be like a person-to-person thing right there. And even like with having your hand in a fist versus open, this is one of those things that's going to take experimentation to really find what's going to work for you. Students say like, oh, well, this guy said this, or like, you got to hold the pick this way, you got to pick that way. It's like, yeah, well, are you getting the results that you want? If you're getting the results that you want, then stick with that. If you find that you're not getting results that you want, then yeah, experiment, try different things. Alright, disclaimer time. Every time I watch one of these videos to respond or react to it, it is never with the intention to bring anyone down. I'm not trying to tear anything down. We're just seeing, do we agree? Do I have anything to add to it? Is it coattail riding? Absolutely! But hey, it got you to watch, didn't it? So, Bernth, great guitar player, very skilled. He definitely can play plenty more than I can on certain things. So, you know, I am not going to be claiming I am better than him. Never will, never have. So let's see here. He has a video called 5 Picking Tips to Save Years of Guitar Practice. Let's see, do we agree?
So before we move to today's exercises, and I can't wait to show them to you because it's not what you're probably thinking, I want to show you how I hold my pick and why I changed my grip a couple of times over the last couple of years. So first of all, unsurprisingly, I like to work with these picks, so really small picks, the chest 3 size. When I played bigger picks like that one, I sometimes had the issue that I was getting stuck between the strings and they're also kind of scratchy sometimes. So this is the difference in size. It doesn't look that dramatic.
Yeah, a lot of people, a lot of shred guys like to use the small jazz style picks. They always felt too small to me. I know there's plenty of people that use the bigger picks and they play just fine. If you find that the pick is getting stuck in the strings, you could try using the smaller pick, or it's just, you also just get used to having less pick stick through the string. So if I am using a, let's say just this size pick right there as standard size, I don't have a lot of pick sticking through the string. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get a great angle on this. Let's try here. See, I don't, like, there's very little tip of that pick showing. The issue people have is when they have more like this much sticking out. And yeah, I'm definitely having to work a bit harder because I got more pick flopping around. But when I choke up on the pick, then I have much more control over it. And using like the smaller jazz style pick, I think people use that because, well, it just reduces room for error. Now, using my Bog Street pick, I actually get the 4mm now, which you have to get in their Bog Street Labs section. I just got so used to the 4. Like the 3 still feels good, but the 4mm, I don't know, just now I'm so used to it, just feels perfect. And with this, because of the bevel, it's like makes it a lot easier to know how far you got to hit the pick into the string, which is not far at all. So just having just the tip of the pick, the very tip of the pick, brush against the string, that's really the goal there. So yeah, using a different size pick can absolutely help.
But to me it feels completely different. Anyways, here's my right hand, my picking hand. So just as a quick reminder concerning the pick grip, what feels very natural for me is doing that. I used to hold my pick like that, and this resulted in this kind of hole or O shape. You can see this with a lot of older material on the channel, and this was not the best pick grip that I discovered so far. So instead of holding the pick like that, which kind of feels a bit awkward, and I think I was holding it just a little bit differently with every session, so I didn't get consistent results. I'm holding it like that, and you can try this out at home easily. I'm just letting my thumb fall, basically. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on it. And this pick grip got me the most consistent and best results so far.
So I would have liked it if Bernth discussed like experimenting with perhaps different pick grip to see what works for you. One thing that he's doing that I actually advise people not to do, for a lot of them, because of thumb picking issues that I see happen, is I don't think people should start with their thumb bent like this, because too often I notice that people will begin pushing their pick the wrong direction if they start moving their thumb for picking. I've also have talked to one guy I can think of in particular. Instead of having the fist benefit of actually opening up the fingers, because I've noticed I can get much closer to the strings this way, and I have more like back and forth motion or pick slanting changes I can make if my hand is open. Because I notice if you have you're in a fist, well, the knuckles get in the way of the strings. So if I hold the pick the way he's doing it, that definitely feels weird. I don't like that in the slightest, but if I'm making a fist, then that makes sense. Because if I'm making a fist right now, holding it the way he was, I can see that working. But I do not do the fist. My hand is open, so holding it here, more like he used to, thumb over the last part of my finger there where the fingernail is, that works for me. So I would imagine it would be like a person-to-person thing right there. Even like with having your hand in a fist versus open. This is one of those things that's going to take experimentation to really find what's going to work for you. Students say like, oh, well, this guy said this, or like, you got to hold the pick this way, you got to pick that way. It's like, yeah, well, are you getting the results that you want? If you're getting the results that you want, then stick with that. If you find that you're not getting results that you want, then yeah, experiment, try different things. Just like Bernth did. Bernth tried different things until he found what was working best for him. So as far as like starting with your thumb bent, not a fan of that, because again, if you start actually using thumb motion, if you're starting with your thumb bent, you'll end up picking down towards the neck and then up towards the bridge. So kind of doing this sort of thing. But if you use your wrist, you go the other direction. So if you're going to use your thumb picking or do any thumb picking, really, I don't see any benefit to starting with your thumb bent and doing it this way. None whatsoever, because eventually your wrist is going to have to start taking over to make the faster motions. So start with a flat thumb if you're going to use any thumb picking. So this way, when you pick down with your thumb, it bends down towards the bridge, which is the same direction your wrist goes. And then when you straighten your thumb up, it goes up towards the neck, the same way your wrist goes. We don't want to have the pick going in two different directions at once. It took many years of me finally realizing what was happening with a couple students as to why they could not sync up the thumb into the wrist movement and make progress. It's because the thumb was going one way and the wrist was going another. We don't want it going the opposite direction at the same time. It doesn't work. All right, correcting bad habits. Correcting the bad habits. Let's continue.
There's one bad habit that I encountered as soon as I switched to smaller picks, and I had to fight this one for quite a couple of years actually. First of all, I was closing my fist after playing like that for a while because my fingers are touching the strings and the knot. So when I closed my hand and made a fist and switched to smaller picks, I got much better results. But I was still wondering why I got so much string noise when I was playing fast, and I almost always played with a fret rep because of that. I will try to replicate it. It will sound something like that. That sounds kind of okay, but not exactly how I wanted it to sound. My knuckles were actually rubbing against the top strings as I was playing. So it sounded something like that if you take away the picking. That doesn't sound too good. And when I had long alternate picking sessions and I worked really hard, I was all scratched up right here and bleeding, so I thought this is probably not the right way to do this. So once again, here's how it looks like when my knuckles are scratching against the top strings. It kind of sounds almost... So once again, here's how it looks like when my knuckles are scratching against the top strings. It kind of sounds almost okay. You can't actually hear that extremely loud, but it already feels like I'm grinding away my fingers with a cheese grinder or something like that. So this is how I'm playing now. I just make sure that my knuckles and my fingers are not touching the other higher strings. And since I'm playing like that and not like that, I don't really need a fret rep anymore when I'm playing fast. So it was not a problem with my left hand technique, with my fretting hand technique. It was actually a problem with my picking technique. So it sounds much cleaner when I play this way and I avoid that scratching motion.
Okay. I guess what one concern I have is like, all right, so that's fine. That's good that he noticed that his knuckles were dragging across the strings all the time. But I guess this will go further into what I noticed with one student. So we go in to old Troy Grady territory. We talk about pick slanting, or as he puts it now, escape motion. Well, I still like to think of it like this, like two different ways. Like you got like the palm mute hand position where you have the pick slanted in this fashion where the point is up towards you, the butt of the pick is down. So when you pick like this, you can see the inside of your hand, and it has the pick kind of slide down this way. It's great for downstrokes because the pick is going the correct way to glide across the strings, whereas this way, well, even doing the whole knuckle thing or having the fist, that's all fine and good if you're in that position where you see the back of your hand and you can't see the inside. But what I noticed with one student is if he tried to go between these two positions, damn near every time he would go like this, his knuckles would hit. So that's why I said, just open up the hand, get used to that. And one thing I find beneficial with playing like this is my pinky can really help do all kinds of muting stuff by laying across the strings. And sure, you can make up for lost picking hand muting technique with the fretting hand, but why not just make it easiest for both hands, the right and the left? Use both to its advantages. So I'm curious like how he palm mutes them, because he was holding the pick like this and he's always in that spot. Like, I wonder how he palm mutes, because I don't see how you can palm mute well while holding the pick this way, and you got your knuckles, that could be a problem. Because when you palm mute, you're supposed to have this part of your hand touching the strings, which why it makes sense to me to have your hand open, so this way you get really chunky technique. Anyway, let's continue. Here we go with his first exercise on this. Oh man, I might be upsetting Bernth fanboys. Basically, there's more than one way to do this stuff. You gotta find what works best for you. If the notes sound the way that you want them to, then you're fine. But if you're having trouble getting the notes to sound the way you want them to, you're gonna have to try something else.
Alright, now that we covered this bad picking technique habit, let's get to work on exercise number 1. This is all about getting rid of that dreaded full arm motion. So step 1 is really easy, and the reason why I love to recommend this exercise is because you can't really play it like that, using your elbow or your full arm. You basically have to stay loose and you can't play it like that. So with this super simple first exercise, you work on effectively unlocking your wrist when you're playing. So instead of being cramped up with alternate picking and always kind of playing and pushing like that, you learn to let go and to relax your wrist. And that's the first secret that will make your technique much more effective and economic. So I was also guilty of using an elbow motion in the past. I almost can't do it anymore, just really completely locking up my wrist. And that also really helped me back with feeling the note values and reducing my picking attack to get a more clean signal. So especially when I'm working with a clean sound.
His fingers were open there a little bit, by the way, on his right hand.
This has really helped me with getting out more dynamics when it comes to fast picking sections than always working like that, using my full elbow. Okay, so once you feel comfortable with this beginner exercise, you can move on to the second, rhythmically a bit more challenging workout.
Well, wait a minute. Like, you could do what he did using your elbow. Of course you can. So I feel like more should have been said. If the idea is to loosen up the wrist, how would it feel to use the wrist versus using the elbow? Well, let's go into that. How could you actually do that? Because sometimes, yes, just using your wrist is a beneficial thing. Because you do need to learn how to do this. One guy, I can't remember who he was, but was talking about like strumming, and like the way he described it was like pretend like your hand is wet and you're like shaking the water off, something like that. Or like maybe like you smashed your hand with a hammer, you're like ah, you know, and you're just trying to shake it out that way. So you're just doing that while holding the pick. And And there's nothing necessarily wrong with using the elbow, but it really depends on what it is. Like when you get going crazy fast, as many have seen on this channel, you have to use the elbow to go stupidly fast. You're not going to get that fast with just the wrist. You got to use the bigger muscles. But that's only when the really, really fast stuff kicks in. So yeah, understanding how your hand and your wrist work in order to play without the elbow at the slower speeds will make you a much more controlled player. So I do agree, yeah, learning how to use your wrist is a very important and helpful aspect of playing. Just wish he would have gone into more detail about, like, with that exercise there. It's like, well, how is that going to actually help loosen up your wrist? What are some cues in order to make that happen? So what are some cues? Like, well, the whole, like, flopping the wrist around like you're trying to shake water off the hand is a good way. Also, bend your wrist a little bit. Bend the wrist a little bit, so this way you have this kind of motion going on here. So when I'm doing that, you see the wrist is bent just a bit. And another thing, like, some people, they talk about, I'm trying to mimic how he's doing this too. I actually did a video about this, another reason why you don't want to use fist picking. And again, if it works for you, then use it. But talk about, like, the idea of having tension in your arm when you're playing. Well, when you make a fist, aren't you usually tensing up when you make a fist? So don't make a fist, and perhaps you'll naturally relax more. Another reason why you may want to try having your fingers out. You can try not moving your arm whatsoever. Just like keep it on the guitar. Keep your elbow as if it's in a cast. Think like it's in a cast. See, it's not moving at all. Very little. I'm not doing stuff like that, right? But as you start playing some stuff, like, your elbow will naturally want to kick in. But, like, there's a difference between allowing your elbow to work with your wrist, besides, like, keeping your wrist totally locked. So that's wrist being locked. That's the wrist being loose and working with the elbow at the same time. So anyway, let's see what exercise number 2 is.
Okay, so the second workout is a bit more advanced. You're not just working with downstroke, upstroke, downstroke, upstroke, and so on. We're introducing a more interesting rhythmic pattern. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, so once again the
would be nice. I don't know. I would throw in some chords too, instead of just doing string rakes, because then it will sound more interesting.
Okay, so the second workout is a bit more advanced. You're not just working with downstroke, upstroke, downstroke, upstroke, and so on. We're introducing a more interesting rhythmic pattern. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, so once again the focus is on staying loose and relaxed and not playing like that. So getting rid of that full arm motion and trading it for an economic and relaxed wrist motion. So once again a bit slower. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. But enough with the dead note patterns, let's move to exercise number 3.
Chords! Oh. I thought I was going to do chords. Aww.
So working on 2 note per string patterns like this was a big game changer.
Alright, let's see what he has to say.
For me, because I always only focused on the 3-note per string stuff. So when you take chord shapes, cadences or arpeggios and turn them into alternate picking exercises like that, always playing 2 notes per string, you get workouts that are really effective for training your wrist motion and also for your string transitioning skills, since you constantly have to hop between different strings after just 2 picking strokes. Let's raise the stakes and make this even more difficult with exercise number 4. The next step I can really recommend on your picking technique journey is keeping this approach, so working with chord shapes or arpeggios, but only playing 1 note per string while still working with alternate picking.
Definitely makes it harder. And now this one. Yeah, it's definitely a hell of an alternate picking exercise to that sort of thing, because it's a son of a bitch. It's a bitch of a son.
So for this 4th really challenging workout concept, you're still working with alternate picking, but now you have to play on a different string for every single note, and this will really put your string transitioning skills to the test. That is much harder than it actually looks. So before we tackle the big daily workout, I have one more exercise for you, and this one is finally based on those classic scale workouts. You're playing the A minor scale, ascending and descending, but you have to switch between playing 16th notes and 16th note triplets.
Yeah, going between 16th notes and 16th note triples will definitely push the, make your rhythmic playing better.
So scale workouts like this are extremely effective when it comes to developing a better picking technique, and I want you to focus on not tensing up with your picking hand as soon as you move to the faster note values. So in order to get the most out of this exercise, make sure to work with a relaxed wrist motion for both the 16th notes and for the triplets for the faster notes, and don't completely change your technique for both of these groups. By the way, you can practice all of today's exercises together with me in different tempos. As always, I made video play-alongs, backing tracks, guitar profiles and PDF tabs for patreon.com/Bernth. So those are 5 steps I can really recommend to develop a much more efficient and relaxed alternate picking technique. Number 1, work on unlocking your wrist with dead note patterns. Number 2, make sure to add rhythmic variations and challenges to that. Number 3, please don't neglect 2 note per string patterns.
I understand what he means, but I don't think it's worded
and relaxed alternate picking technique. Number 1, work on unlocking your wrist with dead note patterns.
Okay, dead note. So typically when you see X's on the strings like that, it's referring to string rakes. Dead note, you could call it that, but it's usually just string rake. But perhaps I'm wrong here. That's how I was taught. String rakes, dead notes. I don't think you have to use just dead notes or string rakes in order to practice this sort of thing. I think people would have a much more enjoyable time using chords instead of just string raking. So use chords if you want to. It's totally fine. And then he says this.
Number 2, make sure to add rhythmic variations and challenges.
So rhythmic here, like when I hear rhythmic variation, like he basically went from 16th notes to 16th notes. To me, that's not rhythmic variation unless we're talking about like how he's accentuating things or drum direction variation, because he's definitely changed the dynamics of when he hits hard versus soft, and he has changed going from down up to down up down up down. So like accent change, accent variation for sure. Rhythmically it's exactly the same. It's just all 16th notes, but the accent pattern has changed. So felt that is worth saying. I don't want someone to listen to that and think, oh well, just by hitting something with a different accent pattern, therefore it's a different rhythm. Mathematically, no, it is not. Accent's different, though. All right, well, conclusion here. What do I think about what Mr. Bernth has to say there? The biggest things I wish he had mentioned, it's important to find what pick grip works best for you. If the notes you are producing come out the way you want them to sound, then you're fine. Again, I do not use the closed hand as he does. I keep my fingers open, and that works very well for me. Clearly, keeping his hand closed works well for him. So you got to try both ways to see what works for you. I would have liked to see chords, power chords. Why not? Metal based, right? So you want to use power chords instead of the whole dead note thing or string rake thing when you're working on unlocking that right hand or your strumming hand if you're a left-handed player. What benefits could there be to just doing the string raking? You don't have to worry about the fretting hand anymore. You just hold down some dead notes and rakety rakety rakety. So then you can just focus on the right hand itself. So once you get used to just get that loose motion in your wrist with the string rakes, then perhaps I'll go to some chords instead of going from dead notes of 3 strings straight into 2 notes per string picking. I feel like there's a lot of gaps missed in that, and that could really trip people up. I feel like that's way too big of a jump for most people. Having some additional steps in there I think would have been more beneficial for everybody. But overall, the message of getting the wrist looser instead of being really rigid, absolutely agree with that. And really, like, anything that you play can be turned into an exercise to help you be better at picking. If you're picking something, and as you work on the thing you're picking, if it improves your picking, you got an exercise that works well for you. Anything can be turned into an exercise. Every single thing you play can technically be an exercise. It's kind of hard to say like, oh, this is a specific picking exercise.